Is there?
Oh, there's still people out there. Yeah, well, it's 4 o'clock.
Good afternoon, members, officers. Welcome to the Budget Advisory Committee. As you'll see on the agenda as per the screens, item 1 is the appointment of the chair for this committee meeting. Can I please invite any nominations, please?
I second that.
So Councillor Long having been first, seconded, third, fourth and fifth. Are there any other nominations?
No other nominations.
No other nominations. Can I have a show of hands, please, in favour of Councillor Long? That is undoubtedly unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Long. You are therefore chair of this committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Right. As an appointment of chairman, I would like to exercise my right to nominate a vice chairman, to appoint a vice chairman, and I would like to nominate Councillor Taylor as vice chairman for this meeting. Is there a sticker? Can I, if there are no other nominations, pardon? Can I have a show of hands, please, for... Thank you.
That's clearly carried for Councillor Taylor to be vice chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the committee meeting held on the 11th of January 24. You've had those minutes. For those present at that meeting, can I have an agreement that they are correct? Members? So moved. Thank you. Show of hands, please, for accepting those minutes.
Thank you, Chair. That's carried for the approval of the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, division of agenda. I'm not aware there's any reason to divide the agenda. Agenda item 6, declarations of interest, as to whether anybody has any personal disclosable pecuniary interests in the matters to be discussed today. I'm assuming we have the normal dispensation because of council tax for members. If there are none, thank you. Just to sort of confirm that we have a number of members who are joining us through Teams online. Obviously, welcome. If you can do a show of, show your hands when you wish to speak or pass comment. But just to remind you, obviously, full contribution and involvement in the meeting, raising questions and making comments, but you will be unable, if there are votes, to vote as you're online. Just a confirmation. Move on to agenda item 7, which is the draft revenue and capital budget proposals. And if I can ask, just trying to get it going, if I can ask Lisa Buckle to introduce that for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Welcome, members, to this afternoon's Budget Advisory Committee, where we will be considering the draft revenue and capital budget proposals for the next financial year, 2025-26. Just picking out some of the key parts from the budget report. So members will be aware that just before Christmas we received the local government finance settlement from the government, which set out our funding for 2025-26. And from that, we've been able to do some modelling, looking forward to the financial years 26-27 and 27-28, to estimate what we think our budget gaps will be for those years. And that is shown on page 6. The government have said that they are looking to do some quite significant local government reforms for 26-27 onwards. There will be a consultation in the summer on that. So whilst at the moment we don't have any figures from government about what that will look like, we have been using some modelling tools over the Christmas period. And we estimate that for 26-27, the council will have a budget gap of about 3.4 million. And then going forward to 27-28, we're estimating that to be about 2.9 million. So some of the things that were announced as part of the finance settlement were the Rural Services Delivery Grant, which is a grant that mainly rural authorities received. That has been withdrawn. That was over £500,000 annually that the council was receiving. We also know that new homes bonus will be the last year, 25-26, of new homes bonus payments. We are currently predicted to receive just under £1 million for 25-26, 960,000. And the proposal within this budget report is that we use all of that new homes bonus funding to fund our base budget. Also recognising the fact that when new homes bonus came into being, it was actually top sliced from revenue support grant. So withdrawals of some of these funds, that is significantly increasing our budget gap for 26-27 onwards. For 25-26, these papers do present members with proposals for a balanced budget for next year. Obviously, that is our duty to set a balanced budget. Going forward on page 7, just a bit of background really about previous financial settlements. So if we go all the way back to 2009-2010, we used to receive core government funding from government of around about £4 million. That was what we received in revenue support grant, and gradually over a period of 10 years up until 2020, that was withdrawn. So we now receive minimal government support, and the revenue support grant for next year will be about 169,000. Obviously, we're continuing to work in partnership with West Devon Borough Council. That has enabled us to make annual savings of about 3.9 million. So that's been a significant amount of savings that the council's been able to make by working in partnership. Moving forward on page 8, that just sets out our key assumptions for the medium-term financial strategy and what we've built into the modelling. On page 9, that shows our current net budget, 13.1 million, and you can see there within the diagram all of the things that feed into the budget setting process. If we look at our budget pressures for next year, we have estimated those to be 3.98 million. That's shown on page 10, and there's a breakdown of the key elements within that. And then looking at the other side, in terms of savings, reduced expenditure and additional income, we're estimating that to be about 3.35 million. And again, there's a breakdown of some of the key elements within that. And then on page 12, we've got a section in terms of what's happened to our grant income and our funding sources. So you can see in the Appendix C that our actual core spending power, so that is how much additional government funding have we got for next year. For us as the District Council, that is actually 0%. So we've had a nil core spending power increase. And we will actually receive a floor payment from government of 584,000. So the only reason our core spending power has been kept at 0 is because we've received this floor payment to take us up to the level of funding that we have in 24-25. And nationally, 125 district councils are on that floor and will receive a floor payment from government. There has been a new 600 million recovery grant has been introduced by the government. Unfortunately, we haven't received any allocation from that 600 million, and the details of that are set out there on page 12. And that recovery grant has been based on deprivation indices, on population and ability to raise income locally. Moving forward on page 13, it just sets out the council plan and the proposed timetable for that. So the year 2 delivery plan, that's going to be considered by the executive on the 6th of March, and that will go forward to the full council meeting on the 20th of March. So it's on a slightly later timescale than the setting of the normal revenue and capital budget, which is what we're considering today. Moving forward on page 14, second homes council tax premium. So we've calculated the tax base for next year, and our share, the South Hams District Council share of the second homes council tax premium, is about 603,000. That's our 8% share of the second homes premium. And it's proposed to transfer all of that 603,000 into a housing initiatives earmark reserve to further the council's housing priority. Moving forward, there are some sections there on reserves, which I won't go into, but the figures are there. And within the appendices, Appendix F, those do set out capital budget proposals for next year. Those total just over 3.1 million, and those are detailed for members within Appendix F. Just wanted to very quickly touch on Appendix C, because that sets out details around council tax. And in the middle of February, on the 13th of February, members will formally vote on the council tax for next year, 25-26. The current proposal is for a 2.99% increase. That's what's modelled within these budget papers. That would be a band D council tax for the district council of £196.66. That would be an increase of £5.70 for the year, or just under 11 pence per week. And the council share of the council tax will be set at the council meeting on the 13th of February. And I just also wanted to point out that a 1% increase in council tax generates 85,000 of extra council tax income for us as a district council. I think those are the key points, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Yes, please. Any questions? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah. You switched it off, didn't you?
No.
Very good. Sorry, I lost my thread there. Yeah, the council tax you suggested was going to gain. Is that the maximum we can charge, or is that a figure that's out of the maximum?
So the maximum for us as a district council is the higher of £5 or 2.99%. So the 2.99%, which would be a bandy of £196.66, yes, that is the maximum for us as a district council, without having to hold a council tax referendum. So the maximum for us is 2.99%. For the fire authority, the limit is a £5 limit. For the police, the increase is a £14 increase. Shire districts such as ourselves, 2.99 or £5. Towns and parishes aren't limited, so there's no referendum limit for them. For upper tier councils, it's 4.99%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rake.
Thank you, Chair. Lisa, thank you for this report. I just wonder if there's a sort of perverse incentive in terms of the government, the various streams of government sort of top-up funding. Are we effectively punished for being a well-run council?
The funding is set on different formulas. So there are very complex formulas behind things like the revenue support grant, behind things like how they set a business rate baseline. Government take their own view on things like council tax referendum limits. It's a difficult one to answer. I think certainly what we've seen within the settlement is that Rural Services Delivery Grant, the fact that that has been taken away for next year, I think that there was certainly not much warning at all that that was going to happen. So I think for rural authorities and particularly district councils, that loss of rural funding has been significant. The recovery fund, the 600 million, the fact that we didn't receive any income from that at all, no allocation. If you look at where the allocation of that funding has gone, it has gone to sort of metropolitan districts have received the highest increase. It's been done on deprivation indices and population. So, yeah, I think the settlement wasn't, certainly in terms of the Rural Service Delivery Grant, wasn't what we were expecting. And I think in our response to the local government finance settlement, we have said, you know, there wasn't any consultation around the fact that Rural Services Delivery Grant has just been withdrawn. And we've put that in our our consultation response. Yes, but I think the Audit and Governance Committee considered reports from our external auditors on things like our which have rated us in terms of our financial sustainability, our governance, and we've received all green ratings on that. So yes, we are a well-run authority, but I don't think there is a specific link within the formally in terms of funding to external reports on things like that.
Okay, Mr. Muller.
Just to give some more context to that, Councillor Rake, I've just been on a call with Southwest Council's chief executives, and that ranges from Dorset, Wiltshire, right up into Gloucestershire, so a range of unitary and district councils. And only one council, when asked about state of finances and the financial settlement, only one council said that they'd received money from the recovery grant, and that was Plymouth.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you. The loss of the RSDG, is that going to be challenged or is it going to be accepted?
So I will be circulating to members our response to the local government finance settlement, but very much we have challenged that and said there was no prior consultation with local authorities about what impact would that have on them and on their finances. I mean, 550,000 for us is significant, and many rural authorities, you know, some rural counties have lost sort of 10, 20 million. So it's been huge. Overall, the Rural Services Delivery Grant nationally is 110 million. So I think the point we've made back to government is, when you look at where government are allocating all of the funds, 110 million is not a significant amount when you consider other pots of funding which are being distributed by government. But the impact on rural authorities is huge. And we've given evidence about, yes, it does cost more to deliver services in rural areas, particularly for things like waste services, where it takes a long time to go from property to property because of how rural we are. Certainly the District Councils Network, the LGA have all made that point back to government about the Rural Services Delivery Grant going and the impact that has had on rural authorities.
Are they intending to supplement or to sort of make up the money in different ways, or is it just a loss and it's just across the board?
I think the recovery grant, again, that's something new. That's been done on, they've used 2019 deprivation industry indices, they've used population. I think the concern within the sector is that the local government reforms which are going to come in 2026-27 may follow a sort of similar pattern to the allocation of the recovery grant, in which case when South Hams doesn't receive anything from that's quite a worrying trend if that's the direction of travel. And when you couple that with the fact that new homes bonus funding is being taken away, that's another £1 million for us. And what we don't know is, will any scheme come in its place? So the government haven't said we're taking away new homes bonus funding and there's going to be no future scheme. That's what we're assuming. We're assuming the worst case scenario. The government have said there is going to be a consultation on new homes bonus in the summer, but without seeing the details of that consultation, we have to assume that there will be no replacement scheme for new homes bonus. So I think we're getting an impact of lots of things all impacting on the council's finances all at the same time. And that's why you see a very significant budget gap for next year. I mean, going back in our budget papers, you wouldn't have seen budget gaps as big as that.
What was the rationale for particularly SDG? Did you get a rationale?
So I think the government have said that they want to redirect where funds are going. I think Jim McMahon, the minister, said the recovery grant is to get councils back on their feet, but it's the councils that grant has been targeted towards that are receiving the funding. So yeah, we don't really know. We can just make our representations known as part of the consultation, which is what we've done. I do also want to pay credit to the Rural Services Network as well, because they've done a lot of work on behalf of rural authorities. They met with ministers as soon as the finance settlement was announced to express their huge concern about the fact that Rural Service Delivery Grant has gone, and are looking to work with government about I think the point that we've made is, if you're going to do local government reforms in 2026, why would you bring some of it in now, early? Wouldn't you do it all in one go next year? Yeah, rather than what seems to have happened is some of it has come in now with a larger local government reform plan for next year.
Thank you, Ms. Buckle. Mr. Maloney, come back in.
Yeah, just a bit more context in answer to that question. So at the LGA conference last year, I attended a session which was with the deputy leader, Councillor Thomas, and it was the chief executive of the Rural Services Network sat with the newly appointed leader of Manchester City Council, and they each made a really impassioned case as to the funding that was required for governments for councils in terms of that city type setting and the rural setting. And at the end of it, to be honest, it was like impossible to choose, because they were both really, really good cases in terms of what Lisa said about the Rural Services Network. But it's clear the recovery grant, 80 million almost of that 600 million went to Liverpool and Manchester. So if you want to see the direction of travel from the government, there you go. The other thing, and I don't know whether you did mention it, Lisa, was the national insurance impact. And Southwest councils have written with a list of the impacts across all the Southwest councils, and it really affects the unitary authorities that have got social care and so on, in the tune of millions. And they've written to the government minister highlighting this and expressing how much it's impacting councils financially. We were told today that we've not had a reply from the government on that. So, just saying.
Members, any other questions? If not, we have recommendations before us. Your views are sought on. And I wonder, Ms. Michael, whether you take us through each of these sort of aspects of what we're being looked to have views on, so that you can give any additional background on these before members come in.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, so the first recommendation is around an increase in council tax for next year. Current proposal is for 2.99%. That would increase the Band D council tax for us as the district council from the current amount, which is £190.96 to £196.66. So that would be an increase of £5.70 per year, or just under 11 pence per week. And I think the details around council tax are set out in Appendix C. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, any particular comments, questions to raise on that? If not, thank you. Are you, with these, just a point of clarification, expecting a vote on each of these topics to come forward? So what I would do, if members are, we can either go right to the end of the areas where views are sought and take a vote individually, or we can vote as we go through on this. And I'm assuming from the point of view that it's not executive members who are expected to vote on
Correct.
this. Just so those executive members who are here, I won't be expecting to see your hands go up at any time on a vote. It's non-executive members present in the room who can vote on this. But obviously views can be expressed by those members who are online.
Can I have a question?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I'm a little bit confused, Lisa, because the original figure was 2.99%, which is an increase of £5.54, which is 11p per week.
Sorry, it's
but this is slightly different.
£5.70.
Yeah, that's slightly different than the original one that went up. That's all.
I think it's set out in Appendix C.
Page is that on?
Yeah, yes, page 30. So currently our bandy is £190.96. Yeah, it may.
If
Yeah,
I can
sorry,
assist,
the
Chair.
previous figure was last year's,
Yeah,
which
sorry.
may have been
Yeah.
in the
All right.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Buckle. If members are so minded, are you happy to take votes on these as we go through, or would you wish to see it as sort of votes taken at the end after consideration of all points? Pardon? Okay, right. With that view, we'll take votes on these as we go through. We have, so that these can come before the executive. On item 1, the increase in the council tax, can I ask for a show of hands as to the support of this? I'm not sure whether we need a sort of proposer and a seconder on this.
Be cleaner if we did actually.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to propose this. Can I have a seconder for seconded? Can I have a show of hands for the increase in council tax as indicated in the recommendations?
That's 15 and unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. I was just apologies, I was looking at the room trying to sort of figure out who was voting. Thank you. If we can move on to item 2, which is the financial pressures shown in Appendix A, if you could take us through that so members are aware, and if we take questions or any sort of comments after. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so in terms of the financial pressures, we call them cost pressures for next year. Those total 3.98 million. Just to pick out, and it's on page 10 of the agenda, some of the largest elements within that 3.98 million. So we've got a provision for a pay award. That's 775,000. So that is based on what we've done is we've modelled the current year's pay award of 2.5%, or £1,300, up to scale 0.43. So modelling that forward, we thought the best way to model the pay award for future years would be really to take the current year's pay award. So that's the assumption we've made. Waste and cleansing services, we've put in 850,000 for that. There was a separate report going to the exec agenda on the 10th of October regarding that. If you look at the budget monitoring report for the current financial year, the service is projecting to overspend by about 790,000. And set out within the papers, there are the reasons around that. So things like compliance with the Environment Act, move the remaining part of the district onto the Devon Line scheme, including a weekly food waste collection. Obviously, we also have things like the National Pay Award, the cost of agency staff, and the cost of overtime. Also within that 3.98 million, we know that next year we will need to reduce the Treasury Management income target, so by 600,000. So current budget is 1.6 million. We're recommending reduce that to 1 million. Finally the employer's national insurance costs, we're predicting that will actually cost the council about 267,000. So though the government have said that they will compensate local authorities for that increase announced by the Chancellor of extra NI, the modelling that we've seen is unfortunately only about a third of our costs are going to be covered by the government grants. So we are expecting that to cost about 267,000. And I've just put a point there in the budget report. The amount that it's likely to cost is actually the equivalent of a 2.9% increase in council tax. We also know temporary accommodation costs are increasing, so we're recommending increasing our budget by 250,000. We are doing everything we can to mitigate that cost through the properties that we've got coming on stream, such as Westfield and the Local Authority Housing Fund, whereby we've been very successful in levering in government grant. And we're also recommending reducing our planning income targets by about 90,000 as well. I think those are the key pressures, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Could I just ask a question about the last point you made about reducing planning income? What's driving that? Because I understood that the MPPF changes and that planning income would increase in terms of the cost. So are we expecting fewer planning applications? Is that what's driving it?
What we've seen is that our planning income targets for the last 2 years have actually been lower than our budgeted income target. We are expecting that within the sort of planning and infrastructure bill, there will be a power for local planning authorities to be able to vary or set their own planning fees, but we've already taken that into account of how much we think that might go up by. So even accounting for that, we think we need to reduce our income targets by about 90,000. And that's just, although we're getting more applications coming through, we're not getting the high value applications come through. So that is having an impact on our income targets.
Councillor Hancock. Councillor Rake.
Thank you. If the modelling on national insurance, say, proves to be excessively pessimistic, I'm assuming that just means and say that whole 267,000 is in fact compensated by government. Is that just woohoo extra gravy when we meet this time next year? I mean, nothing happens. It just goes into the general budget, and we're a bit better off than we expected to be.
What will happen is normally around the first week in February, we will get what's called the final local government finance settlement from government. So any changes to that provisional settlement that we received before Christmas, we would have a look at that, and if they are material, we'd factor that into the budget report coming to members on the 13th of February. I don't think there will be extra funding for the NI purely because the Deputy Prime Minister has said that if there are any amounts that aren't going to be covered, she's expecting councils to fund that from their increases in core spending power. Well, unfortunately, our increase in core spending power was nil. So I don't think there's going to be more funding coming from government, but I could be wrong. They have put 510 million aside for it. But yeah, I think it's looking unlikely. But anything that is a change to what's been announced before Christmas, we will, if we get enough time, we will factor that into the budget report in February. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buckle. Other questions from members? If not, we have that financial pressures there that is laid out. If there are any points you wish to debate in that, you can do that now, or take it to a vote as that we accept those as indicated in Appendix A.
I'm aware that there's an amendment. Could somebody just explain to me when that amendment will be discussed? I don't want to vote on something which means that it's a fait accompli unless that amendment is brought. And I'm wondering what the process is, please.
I think, Chairman, it would come at 3 because that's about the savings and the additional income. I think that's where that comes, because actually the financial pressures are the financial pressures and you can't really amend them. So I wish we could, but we can't. But I think it comes at 3, which is the savings and the income to balance the budget. That's what I would recommend, Chairman.
And obviously prior to 5, which is directly impacted by this.
Yes.
So we'll take, if with your forbearance, we'll take item 2, which is the financial pressures. Any sort of comments or debate on that, or are you happy to vote on those as accepting those as a recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seconded? I'll second as a recommendation. Can I have a show of hands as that this committee recommends those?
That's unanimous. 15 votes for part 2 of the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now obviously move on to item 3, which is savings, additional income. As said there is, if you can go through those for us, Ms. Buckle, and we can...
Yes, certainly, Chairman, thank you. So I think this is page 11 of the papers for today. So savings, reduced expenditure and additional income, as modelled, that is totalling 3.35 million. So if I just pick out some of the items within there, we did ask all of our heads of service to make efficiency savings. Those have been set out in the appendices and have totaled just over 600,000. So that's been from things like service reviews, generating more income in services, and we have got some savings on utilities from a recent procurement. Going forward, still on page 11, so we have been notified that we are going to receive some government grant income in the form of extended producer responsibility. It's known as EPR income. That's been announced by government as being just over £1 million, 1,025,000. That will be a DEFRA grant, and we will get that grant every year. And it's to meet the cost of the new EPR responsibilities. So this is about increasing the amount of packaging that is actually going to be recycled, and each local authority will receive an allocation of that DEFRA grant. So we have been told that that's going to be a guaranteed amount for next year. I'll bring in the Deputy Chief Exec.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. You said it wrong again, Lisa, sorry. So the aim of this is effectively a tax on the producers of packaging. So the aim of it is to reduce the amount of packaging that's produced. So whilst Lisa's right in terms of it is a grant we will get each year, the whole aim of this is that producers produce less packaging, which means we then recycle less, which means the amount that we get as a grant will reduce. So don't think that we're going to get £1 million every year, because the whole aim of this tax is to tax the producers so that they don't produce the packaging. So if they reduce the packaging, we have to submit the tonnages of packaging that we collect. We get our grant based on those tonnages. So I expect it to gradually reduce, and depending on the severity of that, I have no idea what that tax relates to in terms of a manufacturer, whether it, someone like Unilever, whether it's, billions or whether it's a few million, but I have no concept of that. But in terms of, I expect it to go down gradually over the years, just to clarify that. Sorry, Lisa.
Thank you. So still on page 11, car parking, 970,000 is shown in the appendices. The Executive has considered reports on car parking fees and charges on 10th of October, 21st of November and the 6th of December. So within the medium-term financial strategy in September, there was a figure of 150,000, and that was just for normal increased footfall in the car parks. And following the recent reports, the income budget for car parking has been modelled to increase by an additional 820,000. Car parking charges haven't been increased for the past 4 years, and the inflationary impact of that is 22%. We have been out to consultation on car parking. The executive agenda was published yesterday, and the results of that within a report which is on the executive agenda for the 23rd of January. Garden waste income, 125,000. A charge of £68 is proposed for next year, 25-26, with the charge being £65 if signed up before the 31st of March. And also within there, we are looking to make salary savings from the planning assistant director post. That post is currently vacant, and we are proposing not to recruit to that, and that is actually a shared post with West Devon. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Buckle. Obviously, are there any questions that we do have a proposal before us? But if there are any questions to Ms. Buckle first. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lisa, for presenting it like this. I firstly want to commend you and the council for making savings. I mean, I know there's some grants included in that, as you mentioned, but £3.35 million worth of savings or extra income is pretty sizable. And just some thoughts on that. I mean, firstly, are we confident that we can carry on delivering service quality despite cutting back on things like environmental health and sorry, there's another one here, business continuity reduction? Is that going to impact in any way the smooth running of the council? And secondly, how much longer can we make savings in what the council spends just by cutting back staff and other facilities? Surely we're getting a bit close to the bone now, aren't we? Thank you.
So in terms of the savings that we've made in terms of the council and the organisational savings that we've made, we put the challenge out to our heads of service and the various departments in effect for this financial year so that we could deliver the savings next financial year. Because the problem you have, of course, is if you go into the financial year and say you meet the savings, you'll never meet them at the start. So therefore we're already so we've been operating in that way already. Obviously, technology changes, new systems come in. So we've just got a new finance system, for example. So there's always the opportunity to improve stuff and get efficiencies out of there. I mean, we've not made any compulsory redundancies whatsoever. This has been through sort of natural wastage and efficiency gains already. And I think there is still scope. There's always scope to improve. We're looking at, the use of AI and how that can assist us and help us in terms of things like, if you take the planning department where we get large numbers of letters of representations, at the minute, somebody has to go through and read every single one of those letters of representation and then provide that information to the planning officer to help them make a decision. So AI could do that for you, and therefore, where that might not work for 10 letters of representation, it won't save a lot. But if there's a large application, one has been heard earlier today, where there's been lots of letters of representation, it could speed up that process, which means the planner can deal with other planning applications quicker and more efficiently. So there is scope to continue to get efficiencies from the organisation and look to change the way we work. And I think the organisation has shown over the last 10 years that we constantly look to try and improve service and be as efficient as possible. Hope that answers your question, Councillor Bonham.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah. Thank you. Perhaps Steve could answer this one. Who was consulted on the car parking? Was it just the large towns, or did smaller towns get involved? Because I had a meeting the other night and I was told that they'd never been consulted.
So there was consultation meetings took place with the main towns, not the small towns.
Right,
and then there was the public consultation, which took place through December and early January.
Lovely. Thanks.
Members, any further questions? If not, Darryl, we want to take this. We have a recommendation to be considered, which has come from Councillor Steele and Councillor Presswell, which, as there, would replace parts 4 and 5 before we consider them. Can I ask, first off, Councillor Steele to basically talk to your...
Just a point of order, it would be recommendation 3 and 5, not 4. I think, Darryl. Is that right?
3 savings additional.
Because 4 is about net contribution to earmark
Contributions.
reserves and this, that, and the other, and
Yeah.
business rate retention reserves. So I think it would be 3, which is the savings and income, and then 5 is transferring to the second homes council tax premium to housing reserve. So is that right, Darryl?
Thank you, Mr. Molyneux, for keeping us on the straight and narrow. Thank you. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is what's, in a nutshell, it's instead of putting the second homes council tax money into reserves, to put it into budget, into core spending, to use for spending rather than put into reserves. My thinking on this, keep it reasonably brief. We've seen, okay, a lot of withdrawal of funding from governments, the rural grant and so on, at the same time that the government is allowing us to collect second homes council tax money. I don't know if it's being cynical or just a coincidence that on the one hand they're giving us more money, on the other hand they're taking away. So when we first thought about second homes council tax money, we looked at it as a windfall, as extra money, but I feel that's not really the case with the withdrawal of other funds. I feel it should be put into core funding to be used for core spending. With that in mind, that would reduce the need to increase car parking charges so significantly. So if we looked at that 603 as put into the budget, car parking in that case wouldn't need to raise the extra 820 through raised charges. It would just need to raise 217. Given the feedback we've received on this, given as well that inflation since we raised it has been 22%, and we're looking at a much higher rise, I feel that this is appropriate. Given as well that, we don't know, but, we've got around 2 years of lifetime left before South Hams as such no longer exists. So I feel the expense and the time needed to introduce the residents' discount scheme would not be worthwhile, given particularly it causes issues for those 30% of car park users who don't use a mobile phone or app to pay, who pay in cash. There will be some financial disadvantage from them. They'll get the extra 30 minutes, but they still need to pay more. And for all those people who are classed as visitors, but in fact just live outside of the district but work within the district, they would not be eligible for the residence discounts, and many of those could well be part-time casual workers who aren't eligible for permits. So we're punishing those who really need the most support. So we've got 14 million reserves. There are other discussions about what we do with those reserves during the local government rearrangement. At any point, the government could come in and say, you can't spend those reserves anymore. They're going to be put into reorganisation costs. So we risk losing that money. We can't quantify that risk, but it is a risk. So I feel that given our point on our life cycle, I don't feel it's the right decision to be putting more money into reserves and, on the other hand, charging our residents more. I feel that there could be that balance, using that second homes council tax money for core spending, so we're not forced into the situation of raising car park charges so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Mr. Molyneux?
Yeah, just as one point of clarification, and then I'll stay clear of this. I would just say that there is absolutely no clarity on the lifespan of the council. So it's dangerous to talk about 1 year and 2 year because we simply do not know at this point in time. So as far as we are concerned, we are still South Hams Council until we have a definitive timeline of when we will not be South Hams Council. So I would just urge members to consider that in thinking about that. And we still have to operate all the services for our residents with whatever financial settlement we get until we have a date of when we will no longer be South Hams District Council. But our residents will still be residents of whatever council area and will still need the same services delivery. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marlowe. Councillor Presswell, you seconded this. Do you wish to, as we'll be debating it and discussing it, do you wish to give comment to it now, or will you wait until later?
Yes, I'm happy to give some comments now. It will give food for thought for those who are going to vote on this, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Presswell.
And I just wanted to, obviously I support Councillor Steele, but I think I just wanted to talk about the process and the result from this. The pricing structure is hugely complicated, I feel, and it was mentioned by one of our councillors who works in the UN to do with equality impact assessments, etc., that it really wasn't of sufficient quality, the assessments that were done, inadequately evaluating the proposals that are coming forward now. And it will result in many different impacts on the more vulnerable groups, and I think we should be clearly aware of that. The timing and duration of the consultation was approaching Christmas, so this really undermined the potential for genuine engagement of our local businesses. I think they were, under stress and trying to make a buck. In Totnes, original conversation stated the figures of the pricing were arrived at based on a 40% increase in visitor rates, but the pricing increases actually exceed this threshold significantly, which again challenges the fairness and validity. There, as Councillor Steele mentioned, and I will repeat it, it's important, there will be a huge financial strain on casual and part-time workers commuting into our towns that live outside the designated area, and they will be rethinking whether they can afford to work within our villages and towns. The dynamics of towns are likely to change because of this hike in car park pricing, where people park and whether they choose to come in by car or other means of transport if they can afford, what they can afford. So it's really going to ricochet into a lot of different parts of community, I think. But on that note, if one was to implement a smaller flat percentage across all the rates, according to the inflation that's happened, well, I see that's fair. And also achieving this balance between fiscal sustainability and the needs of our residents, businesses and our visitors. Yeah, that's it really. Just to highlight, for instance, Totnes, just to be a bit NIMBY about this, we were compared with Exeter and Padstow. We have a very different dynamic to those two. Well, one's a city and one's another town. And I think, again, that would lead to a vulnerability in the results of the price increases. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Presswell. Members, any comments? Councillor Yardy.
Yes. So I'm really, really disappointed that I have to come to this meeting to support this amendment in order to be able to get my points across regarding the absolutely terrible pricing mechanism that is being put in place, especially for Dartmouth. I've been asking for compromise. I've been to the exec meetings. I'm not allowed, or my opinions have been ignored. I really am not happy about that at all. I want at least £1 knocking off this top tier, £8 for 4 hours. We are only beaten by Lyme Regis, NCP, in your own benchmarking exercise. I'm also not happy because I've seen that the Park and Ride, the only other car park in town, is going up by 50%, 100% by the end of the year. Quite often in these discussions, I've had the ferry mentioned as one of the, what about your ferry? We'll do something with that. Again, absolutely. If you have a bridge in Ivy Bridge, if you have a bridge in Kingsbridge, and you have a bridge in Totnes, are you going to charge £6 for somebody to cross it? Well, that's exactly the reality in Dartmouth. And I'm just simply not happy with the way that it is actually at this stage being proposed. I do like the idea that we talk about 22%. I do like the idea that we extend it to permits, because that is the key elephant in the room in this particular case. So in those particular cases, I'm asking for that the SHDC exec listen. We've had we're not described. We've been described as vociferous residents groups that are piping up. Only 420 comments being made. 3 of our groups piped up. The tourism office, the chambers of commerce, 150 companies, the Dartmouth Town Council, 5,500 residents. These are not simple one person writing back within a vociferous way. We have weight behind what we're trying to say, and I am being ignored, and I do not like that at all. So I would like to see that we have a proper process so that I can be listened to, and we can get these points across. And I would like to recommend wholeheartedly, because I cannot do it any other way, the recommendation by Councillor Steele. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yardy, and this is just the place to bring it forward, because none of the members here who are discussing this and voting are on the executive. Members, any other comments? Councillor Bonham.
Thank you, Chair. And while I've got some sympathy with the theme of this amendment, I'm overall not really supportive of it. I mean, I think the starting point is that we need to prepare a balanced budget. And it seems to me that with the cost pressures that we've seen, the savings need to be very substantial, and we need to use money from car parking, sadly, as part of our income, because we haven't raised them for a long time. But I'm sympathetic to the issues raised, especially about Dartmouth. But when we have done a lot to go out to consultation and ask people for their opinion. I think Councillor Brazil was on the TV talking about this. It's been in the paper. There were comments from the public. The main concern of the 433 people objecting, when we look at the issue of differential pricing, the main concern on that topic was raised by a total of 76 people, not an enormous amount. And I think alongside that, we need to recognise the issues of housing that we've talked about in this council many, many times, of how we really work hard to sort out the crisis in housing, which is the affordable housing crisis, really. And if we don't put our own money into that, I don't see how we can expect other bodies, Devon County Council or even the government, to really help us. So I'm sympathetic, but with the sentiment, I can't really support this. I think we've got to go with the recommendation from the officers, really. Thank you.
First of all, it's your proposal. Can I take some other members? And then... Yep, certainly, if it's a response.
I'll be very brief. First of all, surely the affordable housing plans is a long-term planning issue. I don't know why this has been brought to the fore nobody knows the future, but potentially 2 years left. I'm not sure that's a strong argument, as important as it is. And surely that's all been costed, and there must be a timeline with what's going to happen there. A second thing, of the 400 people that were interviewed, what groups were they? How many vulnerable people were? Yeah, I know, but I'm just throwing it up there. How many of those people might have been in some sort of disability group, vulnerable group, etc.? And I don't think there's been adequate representation from them. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Presswell. Right. Other members, Councillor Oram.
Thank you, Chairman. I am sympathetic on the subject of the car parking and the way that it's been presented to council, and how some members don't feel that we've been adequately consulted as a general rule. But I do have to say, I reject this premise of, oh, we've got 2 years left. Until we know what's going on, we have to continue to be a responsible council and act as though that we are going to continue long into the future. And the debate on car parking has already been had, and I think we've already identified that in some way, shape or form, we do have to put up car parking charges, and we haven't done so in many, many years. And just to follow on, the second homes council tax revenue was going into an earmarked reserve for housing, affordable housing. And after the morning I've had, I'm not giving that up very lightly. Yeah, members that were in the meeting this morning will know. Yeah. So I come back to my original point. Until such time as we know we're not going to exist anymore, we have to continue like a responsible council and make these decisions as if we are going to continue long into the future. Therefore, as I said, I'm sympathetic to Councillor Yardy. I wouldn't be supporting this recommendation today, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Oram. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, nobody wants to put up car parking charges. It's not why you signed up to be a councillor, I'm sure. But I'm slightly, the language of this money isn't being put into a reserve, it's being put into an earmarked reserve for second home tax. And I do remember just a couple of months ago, we were all sat in this room and we were all very, very upset because we were talking about the second homes council tax, and we were determined as a council, I don't actually remember if anybody voted against it, that we would spend this money on housing. And we were strong in our condemnation of Devon County Council for betraying us, I think was the language that was used on that day, to spend the money on potholes. Now it seems that this proposal, and though I have sympathy with the upset that raising car parking charges cause, seems that as soon as a wind has blown, we have fallen over, and we are no longer in our we are no longer, sure of ourselves in our commitment to spending this money on affordable housing, and instead we are more concerned about keeping car parking charges low. I think politics is about choices, and I know where my choice is on this, and it's investing money in affordable housing. Councillor Creswell talks about protecting the most vulnerable people, and I'll tell you about vulnerable people. It's people who are homeless, people who are made homeless through evictions, and their lives are ruined through that. But I'll tell you something more about homelessness, is that it ends up on our budget line because we have to spend money on those people and housing them. And as we've heard today, that bill is going up. It's going up and up and up and up. The Audit and Governance Committee sees reports when the auditors look at this, and that graph is going exponential. And so this money will go into an earmarked reserve for affordable housing. And I would urge the executive member for housing to be using that money, not just for affordable housing, but for affordable housing that is for people who are homeless and at risk of being homeless. Because what we need to be doing as a sensible council that's looking after our financial sustainability is getting that bill for temporary accommodation down. And we do that by investing in affordable housing and temporary accommodation and tackling the housing crisis as we have promised to do.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Councillor Panel.
Could I ask a couple of questions of the officers? The first one is, how stable will this income stream from second homes be? Do we have any indication whether it's going to continue at this rate for the next few years, or is it possible that financial, economic circumstances will bring a change in that, so we may get less in future? And secondly, as Councillor Hancock has said, I'm presuming that the money that if we do earmark it for affordable housing will go into a fund that can also purchase homes for temporary accommodation for the homeless. And as we've heard, the budget is going up. And so it won't just be put, as somebody thought, would just be put away for the next few years. It will be of immediate help in buying more accommodation to help people who've been made temporary homeless. And there are other demands on that budget as well. I've got a community land trust in my ward, and I very much that might be coming forward in the next year or two, and I'd very much like to think there'd be some money available to help them. So it's not just a question of waiting several years before we can build our own homes. It's addressing the housing crisis now, if I can just check those two are right.
Ms. Michael,
Yeah.
do you wish to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So in terms of Councillor Panel's first question about how stable will this income be, obviously members have already taken the vote around charging the second homes premium. We have written out to all 4,000 properties that were on our database that we think would be charged the second homes premium. But since then, what we know is there will be some exemptions to the second homes premium. So for things like, there will be some mandatory exceptions. So for things like seasonal homes that can't be lived in all year round, for some annexes, for some unoccupied dwellings where there's been probate, we've gone through all of our database to work out which of those properties will actually be levied the second homes premium. And in terms of our tax base, that's just over, it will be 3,065 bandy equivalent properties. Now there will be some movement, I'm sure, as the bills go out from 1st of April. Members will be asked to consider a report at the executive at the end of January and council in February about whether members want to have some very limited circumstances of where there may be exemptions from that second homes premium, but that would probably be less than around 1% of those numbers. So I think it probably would be a very stable income going forward. It may go up a little bit, it may go down a little bit, but I think our modelling, because we have written out to everyone, we pretty much know our residents' circumstances. So I think we're quite confident that the figures that we've got within the report are pretty accurate around that. And like I said, there will be reports coming forward to members. So in terms of that council tax income, we are expecting that income, that round about 600,000, to be there every year, year on year.
Any answer to the second part of Councillor Panel's question? It is likely that there's already been movement in terms of some options to spend some of that money already, which may even result in amendments to the report that gets published to the executive. So, for example, members will know that we've you'll have heard the LAF funding, which is the funding where the government match fund us to buy houses, which then become our houses and initially used for refugees and so on. But we know there's a new round of that LAF funding. We've been really successful in maximising the amount of houses that we've been able to buy. It's just been announced that there's a new round of that, so it gives us an opportunity to purchase more houses. So that's one of those schemes, and there's another scheme that we're working on now which we think will enable us to bring in more affordable homes. And if you go back to the second home council tax and the principle of what it's trying to achieve, the whole idea is this was because we are effectively penalising second home owners because there is a home that is no longer able to be used by a resident of South Hams. So the worst thing that could happen would be, 100 people say, well, I don't want a second home because I'm not paying second home council tax. But actually, that would bring 100 homes into the marketplace, which is actually what we want. That's the shortage. There is a shortage of houses in the South Hams. So that's part of that.
Sorry, I'm not on the committee. I'm not on the committee, but I'm the housing lead. So just to say, to expand on what Steve said, just the local authority housing fund opportunity we have to obtain 2 more properties. They would be, as I understand it, large HMO, used for HMO. So they'd be large, 4 to 5 bedroom properties. So they could be split up to use for single unit accommodation, which is what we need for single people. That's the main need in the temporary accommodation, which is taking up 5% or so of the budget and rising. So it's much needed. So these are the thought. It's not just the money's not. I'm not influencing anybody's vote at all, but just to explain briefly, the money's not going into reserves to be dusted. Sitting there dustily on the shelf. It's is actually there to be used for, hopefully, for projects short term. So the specific projects short term. So just to try to explain that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Councillor Rake.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things, if I may. The first is, I thought there was a sort of an implication in Councillor Panel's question about do we actually expect, do we have any modelling about whether or not the increase in the second homes, the 100% extra council tax paid on second homes will have a dissuasive effect, and people will sell up second homes and they'll revert to primary residences? I thought that was part of Councillor Pennell's question, but we don't know.
The answer is no. We don't have any modelling on that.
Councillor Hancock might be able to assist.
I do have a bit of expertise on this. To my knowledge, there is no studies on. So Wales would be your exemplar here. Though council tax is 200%, so it wouldn't fit straight. But there's no robust evidence from Wales that people are selling up. There are articles in newspapers which suggest that, but I don't count that as evidence personally. There are no robust studies.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock.
Thank you. If I may then, Chair, just to my main point, I completely share Councillor Yardy's frustration with the process. I think that perhaps coming at it from a slightly different angle, the residents in my ward don't have any paid car parks in the ward, but are therefore by definition kind of users of paid car parks in the towns, whether they look towards Kingsbridge, Dartmouth or Totnes. And I think should have been included in the consultation alongside the major towns, because they're just as affected as users. However, despite my frustrations, I have to say I reach a different conclusion. I think that this proposal, effectively, over the past 4 years, and perhaps even for longer than that, a cliff has grown up between the level of pricing in car parks that we actually charge and what it would have been if we'd even just kept pace with inflation. I think this amendment leaves us still pretty much at the foot of that cliff, and certainly does nothing to address the sort of lost notional revenue in the past. I think it's an increase that's distributed across literally hundreds of thousands of users over the course of a year, and I think it's all about priorities, and my priority would still be to see the second home premium, as Councillor Hancock pointed out, that we were so keen to defend just a few months ago, and the principle of it against cursed Devon for not following suit. I'm, for the time being, prepared to stay there, and therefore won't support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Rake. Councillors, any other comments from this? If not, we do have obviously a proposer and a seconder for this recommendation, and I'd like to put it to the vote now and take a show of hands for those in support of the recommendation before you. The amendment, yes, it is the amendment. Members, show of hand, please. Those in favour?
That's 4 in favour of the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Those against?
10 against. Thank you, Chair.
Any abstentions?
And 1 abstention.
Thank you. Councillor Steele, Councillor Presswell, unfortunately that recommendation has been lost, but Councillor Yardy, can I just say that, that amendment, I said recommendation, Councillor Yardy, can I just say that your forceful comments and views I'd hope to hear at executive and in full council. Right, members, that recommendation of full, we now move on to those before us, and we move on to, and I'm beginning to lose track of where we are.
Number 3.
We are number 3
so
now.
we're voting on number 3?
If
Move number
you're
3.
moving number 3. Any other, does anybody wish to, you've seen the savings, additional income discussed there. Are there any other comments to be made, or can we take a vote on this? I'd like to move to take a vote on this, that recommendation goes forward. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour?
That's 12 in favour. Thank you, Chair.
Those against? Abstentions?
With 3 against.
Thank you. We'll be moving forward. Move on to item 4, net contributions. Ms Buckle, do you wish to say anything on that, the members?
Happy to take any questions. I can very quickly. It's mainly Appendix D, which is page 37 of the papers. So in terms of next year, we would take money out of the new homes bonus, so 962,000. Proposal is to use that to fund the revenue-based budget, and also to take 300,000 from the business rate retention reserve to fund the base budget. That's something that we do every year. In terms of things the other way, we would be putting money into reserves. So, for example, the 603,000 from housing initiatives. But if members then agree how to use that money, that money would then come back out of reserves in 25-26 with a recommendation from members as to how that is to be spent, which has previously been discussed. Also to put things like 177 into the ferry major repairs and renewals fund. So this is to make sure that we've got money set aside for asset replacements and asset repairs for our main assets. And 550,000 into vehicles and plant. Again, this is to make sure we've got a waste fleet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Buckle. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Monos.
Is the council can give me guarantees that the 14 million in reserves are okay for the meantime? Do you have any feedback from the government or anything that compromise that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So as part of the report to members at the council meeting in February, we will look to do a risk assessment around reserves to determine what should be our minimum level. At the moment, we recommend that our minimum level is still around about 1.5 million, and that's based on a calculation looking at what if our costs were, say, 5% more than we were expecting? What if our income drops by 5%? What if council tax collection goes down 1%? Same with business rates. So we do a bit of a calculation to come up with what is the minimum amount that we feel should be held in reserves. Within the report there, government don't give us a sort of prescribed formula that we have to abide by for reserves. So it's very much down to individual councils to set out what they feel is a prudent level of reserves. Within the report on page 16, it does show that our reserves are decreasing. So if you look at where the council was in March 22, our total reserves were 22.8 million. And I've projected the reserves forward to March 26, and I think they'll be around 12.9 million. So our reserves are going down, and that's because obviously they're being used to fund our services, fund our capital programme. fund the council plan. So it is important that we keep a track of those reserves and model them forward. And that's what I've done on page 16. Obviously, as the 151 officer, I'm confident we still have a prudent level of reserves. It is something the auditors look at every year. So in their audit report that they give to the Audit and Governance Committee, if they had concerns over the level of our reserves, they would flag those to members. Yeah, so hopefully that helps to give a response. Thank you.
Has that answered your question? I mean, in terms of the government, again, in terms of the process for any sort of local government reorganisation, is we've been told by the minister that we will get an invitation to submit proposals for what we think local government should look like in Devon. That is early March. We've been then told that we will then be invited to submit detailed proposals, if they like that, with a view that any decisions on those proposals would happen in the autumn. So that's just on the question, on the basis of actually looking at the proposals to how local government should work in Devon. Then they would have to pass and take legislation through government. So the timeline, in my view, is not going to happen in the next 12 months. And we will have an idea in terms of that timeline well before any legislation comes through from the government saying you can't do this or you can't do that. And we also have, as I said at the informal session, the fact that we have a council plan with clear objectives. We would, and we've got, those are earmark reserves, so they're not, so Lisa's talked about both there, but the earmark reserves are exactly that, earmarked for specific things. Then I think we're in a strong position, is what I would say.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Molyneux. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Rake?
Just to follow up on that, Steve, or Lisa, or whoever, the fact that those are earmarked reserves, does that, in a future, if there is a future reorganisation of, sorry, no, clearly there's a future, but if there is a future local government reorganisation, does the fact that those are earmarked reserves give them any protection in that process? Would the fact that they're earmarked for the repair of a ferry or the use in housing transfer over to a future body?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but what I can say is when we complete government returns at the end of every financial year, we are asked by central government to put those reserves into categories. So things like if they are set aside for repairs and renewals, we put that into a certain category. If they are set aside for capital projects, we put that in another category. If it's for something like a strategic initiative like the council plan, we put that in another category. So government would have a list of all councils, I think, in terms of how those earmark reserves have been categorised. But that, and in our accounts, there is a full list of all of our earmark reserves. In terms of how would government consider that in a local government reorganisation, I'm not fully certain. But they do have that data if they wish to use it in some way.
Yeah, perhaps maybe straying along beyond my remit here. I guess it's very easy to get paranoid about what might happen here, but the reality is there will be elected representatives of new council, whether that's you guys or different people, who knows. Those elected representatives will still be serving the residents, the services such as the lower ferries, good example, the waste fleet, still need to carry on delivering those services for residents. And if there are earmarked reserves allocated to make sure that those services happen, it would be disastrous for any new elected council to say, well, we're going to ignore the needs of our residents. And the elected members they are there to represent those. Now, I can't predict the future, but that would be my take on it. So it's easy, I think, to think about, well, we have to, what's going to happen to it. But the reality is it's impossible to predict. but there will be elected members. Those services will still need to operate in whatever format or shape the government, the local government is in, I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Marno. Any other questions? Any other comments? If not, we have the recommendation there to move. Those, can I have a show of hands, those in favour of the recommendation?
That is unanimous for part 4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Move on to part 5.
We've debated this somewhat, really.
That is fairly obvious. I think everybody can see that. I don't know if there's any briefing on that. That is quite clear. Councillor Bonham?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I think we've already talked about this. I just feel that the wording gives the wrong impression. I think that moving it in, saying that we're moving it into an earmarked reserve actually gives the impression to the outside world that we're squirreling away this money, whereas actually we've heard from the housing lead that, and from our officers that we want to spend it. So I move an amendment that at the bottom we add to be spent, or let's phrase it correctly, but earmarked reserve to further the council's housing priority to be spent as soon as practically possible. I want to spend that. I want to spend that. I hope that might be accepted, because I think it's not a reserve we want to squirrel away. We want to use it for beneficial purposes as soon as we practically can to derive the benefit to our communities. Thank you.
Councillor Bonham, I don't think there'd be a member. I see Councillor Hancock, so I'm just about to say I don't think there'd be a member who would disagree with that.
I was just going to second what he was going to say.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock. You've jumped in. I was going to do it anyway. So that is proposed and seconded. Members, can I have a vote, a show of hands in support of that amendment, please?
That is 12 in favour. Thank you, Chair.
Any against? Any against?
None against.
No. Any abstentions?
2 abstentions.
2 abstentions. Thank you. Right. Can I, on that basis, for 5, move that we vote? I think we had a proposer and a seconder for that. If we can have a show of hands, please, those in favour of 5. That recommendation.
That is 11-4 as amended. Thank you, Chair.
Those against?
1 against. Oh, 2. Apologies, 2 against. 2 against.
Two against. Thank you.
With 1 abstention.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 6, capital bids for the 25-26 as set out in Appendix F. Ms Buckle, do you wish to give any highlight to those, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so those are set out on page 41. We have tried to categorise those capital bids within certain categories. So there are some there which are clearly sort of compliance with health and safety and legislative requirements around, certainly around energy performance certificates for both our employment estate and our housing stock. We then have some capital bids which are very essential to keep our assets operational. So things like insulating the roof here at Fullerton House, converting our fleet, which is a report that was considered by the executive on the 10th of October. Some car park refurbishment and remedial works, that would be an annual rolling programme, capital improvement work, and also an annual rolling programme for our public toilets, 50,000, as well as things like equipment for weed clearing, that would be a foam stream unit, 25,000, and we need to also do some feasibility work for our waste service with regards to a land lease. We've also got some capital bids there to further our service delivery initiatives. So 60,000, that would be to fund the South Hams housing offer. We've got 40,000 underspent on that in the current financial year, so that would be a bid to the year 2 delivery plan. So that's our 100,000 housing South Hams housing offer initiative. We've also got an allocation there for £2 million. That would be an in-principle allocation to acquire greenfield land for tree planting and biodiversity net gain. And we do have Mr. Brooke on the call if there are any questions around that. There's also a bid there, £100,000 to fund a changing places public convenience within the district. Also capital projects that could be funded through internal borrowing because they're invest to save projects. And the one that's listed there is solar panels on Kingsbridge Leisure Centre. We also know that we will get some grant allocations next year, so things like disabled facilities grants. We're expecting about 900,000 from the Better Care Fund. And we've also got the 550,000 for the waste fleet replacement programme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Buckle. Any questions of Ms. Buckle on that? Councillor Rake?
Sorry, I'm a bit puzzled by the terminology here. These are bids. Does this mean we're applying for this money from outside sources? No. So,
In the main, they're bids to our own capital projects, capital programme. But for example, the £2 million in principal allocation for greenfield land, with regards to that, we would be bidding for some external funding from, say, DEFRA. And also the Better Care Fund, the 900,000, that's for disabled facilities grants. That's something that we bid for an allocation every year. So in the main, we would be using the council's own funds, but there are a couple, for example, the greenfield land for tree planting, where we would be bidding externally for and attracting in external funds. But that's the main one. So in the main, yes, they are using the council's own funding.
Councillor Bonham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure anyone can answer this because I think the leader of the climate and biodiversity has just scootled out. But I'm just, I don't know if anyone can answer in his absence. I'm surprised we're not seeing more capital bids for climate and biodiversity, because we have sort of responded and announced a climate emergency. And I think it's good that we're spending money fixing our own assets, as is listed in a couple of points here, and applying for funding for tree planting and forests, which is absolutely excellent and has a number of benefits. I just have to comment that I'm surprised there isn't a little bit more.
If I may, Chair. So I think it's because there's already £500,000 allocated per year from the council planned funding, which is not actually what's in this appendix. So there's already £500,000 allocated, and those year 2 delivery plans, there was £500,000 allocated last year. There's £500,000 going to be allocated this year. So there will be a year 2 delivery plan with at least probably £500,000 worth of projects on there in the year 2 delivery plan.
But what I would add is the majority, I think, of the climate change bids will be revenue bids. They're not actually capital. So the only ones which are capital are listed here. So, for example, the installation of the roof. We've got some EV installations at car parks for charging, and we've got the fleet conversion, that's 170,000. But there will be bids for climate change, but in the main they will be revenue bids, not capital bids. And members will see those as they come forward to the executive on the 6th of March and council on the 20th of March.
Thank you, Ms. Buckle. Councillor Panel.
Two questions. Not sure whether this comes under revenue or capital spending, but the Members' Climate Change Fund, is that likely to continue and be renewed in the coming year?
It's currently on the list for proposal in the year 2 delivery plan at the moment.
Right.
So it will be, and it's revenue.
So it's being, right, thank you. And secondly, those of us who've looked at the reserves and thought, well, that might help us out of a hole in the in the time to come. I think the headmaster has told us that we have to be very practical and keep going with the plans we have. But could I ask if the officers will be able to within the next year, when in the light of more knowledge about the rate and speed of local government reform, be able to look at the priorities of the bids for capital expenditure and maybe readjust those which we are able to bring forward and will benefit the community the quickest in the coming year, in the year after.
Using your terminology, the headmaster has been very clear with officers. Councillor Panel, I hope that reassures you.
Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, would the funding for the EV panels for the leisure centres be capital or revenue?
That would be capital, yeah,
Okay.
for the
And
solar panels.
Is there a budget for them in this?
There's a proposal there for 140,000 for the Kingsbridge Leisure Centre. At the moment, the proposal is just for Kingsbridge, because that's one that has got a payback and an invest to save initiative on it. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good start. Thanks.
Members, any other questions or comments? If not, we have the capital bids there as a recommendation. Can I have a show of hands, please, for acceptance of that recommendation to go forward? That's 4.
That's 12 in favour of recommendation 6.
Any against?
None against.
Any abstentions?
With 2 abstentions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, I believe that effectively concludes our business this evening, so we'll declare the meeting closed and thank everybody for their attendance this afternoon, this evening, and for those who have been sitting in this chamber all day, thank you for your forbearance.